And we should be live. Hello, everybody. Welcome to this virtual briefing, Compliant, Localized and AI Ready, How MNOs and MVNOs Must Evolve Their IoT Connectivity Strategies. I'm Matt Hatton. I'm going to be your host for the session today. I will introduce Luigi in just a second, but I'll do a couple of words of housekeeping now. If you would like to ask questions during the session, there is a little Q&A box that you should see at the top of your screen. Just drop your questions in there. We did ask for questions at the registration process, and so we have already in the hopper a set of questions. So we'll get to those at the end. So we'll have about 45 minutes of presentation, and we will have about 15 minutes of Q&A at the end. To preempt your first question, yes, the recording will be available, and we will let you know when the recording and the slides are available for you to get access to. So that will come pretty quickly after the end of the session, the next day or two. We're also going to try and make you work for your webinar today. We've got a series of polls as part of this, so I'll get onto those as we get through the presentation. But let's get things moving, and I should introduce Luigi. Luigi, few words of introduction to yourself.
Yeah, sure. Hello, everyone. Thanks for attending. I am Luigi Capobianco. I'm heading up floLIVE in Middle East and Europe. And I have previous experiences in Vodafone IoT and WANs and other MVNOs within the domain.
Fantastic. And a little bit more about floLIVE in a bit.
Yes.
Agenda for today, as I mentioned, we're going to do quick introductions to Transforma Insights and floLIVE. We're going to then be talking about some key trends in IoT connectivity. We've got 4 trends that we have identified that we want to talk through. Doesn't necessarily represent the entirety of what's going on in IoT connectivity, but certainly some of the interesting stuff that's happening. Optimum approaches that we see for MNOs and MVNOs as a result. Then I'll hand over to Luigi. Well, he'll be jumping in at various points along the way there, but then I'll hand it over to Luigi to talk about how floLIVE is addressing the challenges, and then we'll get to the Q&A at the end. Few words about Transforma Insights. So we're an industry analyst firm focused predominantly on IoT, and within that, the bit that I tend to look at is connectivity, and specifically mobile connectivity. So working with network operators, platform providers, hardware vendors, everybody associated with that space to understand what's going on in the field. But we cover more broadly things to do with artificial intelligence, edge compute, and so on. But probably 90% of what we do is IoT. Luigi, over to you, I think.
Yeah. All right. Thanks, Matt. So at floLIVE, what do? We are an enabler. We're a cellular connectivity enabler. And by enabler, I mean we enable MNOs and MVNOs to connect devices globally through our core network, through our platforms. And we are serving about 60 partners between MNOs and MVNOs globally. We deployed about 80 plus carriers at the moment, 80 plus core networks at the moment, worldwide, distributed in several POPs. And we are trying to keep growing these while providing robust and unparalleled support to our customers.
You've got a very strong interest in what those MNOs and MVNOs ought to be up to, and a few thoughts on what they should be doing as well. Before we get started on that, though, I should note we published a position paper which was on broadly the similar sorts of lines as the webinar that we're on today. Don't rush off and download that and read that now. Stick with us on the webinar, but after we get done, we will send round a link to access that report. So that was published only earlier this month. So for a bit more detail on some of the topics that we're covering today, then you may want to take a look at the report. So on to our key trends in IoT connectivity. This is probably going to be the bulk of the session and what we're talking through. As mentioned, we've identified 4 key areas around artificial intelligence, regulations, technology, and commercial factors, not necessarily in that order. which we'll go through one at a time. And with that in mind, for each one of these, we wanted to run a little poll. And this is the first one. So we're asking, how are you currently using AI within your IoT or connectivity operations? Are you not currently using AI? Are you exploring AI use cases and proof of concept? Are you using AI for operational efficiency, billing, provisioning, routing optimization, that kind of thing? Are you using AI for intelligent connectivity and automation, predictive quality of service, network optimization, and so on? And I've shared those results, so you should all be able to see.
Yeah, I see it.
Results coming through. Excellent. So
there's an interesting trend on the first two, I have to say.
Yes, it's very definitely towards the not adopting that much AI so far end of the spectrum. I'm sure you'll agree.
Yeah. There's someone who only one voter who's actually using it. That would be interesting to know more about that. But that's the same trend we see on the market at the moment. A lot of exploration, a lot of POCs.
Okay, so the interesting thing, and I might just close that poll down, where I think everybody's had enough time, and I think the trend is pretty clear, right?
Yeah.
Not a lot going on at the moment. Very much proofs of concept, which is a little bit surprising to me, in as much as we talk a lot to the MNOs and MVNOs, and that'll be a significant proportion of the people attending the session. And a lot of them are using AI in some form. So for that, even just for their own internal purposes. So that might be for just workflow optimization for invoicing, or it might be for developers writing code and so on. Even if it's not into the more complex stuff around I don't know, threat detection and anomaly detection and so on. That your experience as well?
Yeah, we see it. You mentioned two things: the workload optimization. That's one thing where we also see it, where we also use it, and we see that the first growing trend is more into support. It started maybe with B2C support, I would say, and is moving into B2B support for things that are not too complex to handle. But we don't, as I said, I see the same trend that the poll showed. So I don't see it in active mode in production on the infrastructure or on the actual billing system itself yet.
I think that might be how we'd interpret that response, is that it's not being used for maybe critical systems, but certainly it's being used for a chat bot on the website, for instance, right? I mean, it's that should be a self-evident thing. But we'll get onto that one, because that's what we've got as point number 4 on this slide. What I wanted to talk through just quickly, first off, is, I mean, obviously everybody's aware about AI, and you'll all be aware that it's quite the emerging the emerging technology. But there's always a big question about what the impact is and the implications are for IoT, and which is the reason why we've picked this out as the item number 1. The first 3 are really about, well, what does it do to the market and the market opportunity, and you can kind of think about IoT as being the eyes and ears of AI, and that intersection of the physical and virtual worlds. That's really where we think that AI can have the most impact on real life. So that might be about route optimization for fleet management, or it might be autonomous driving, or all sorts of other approaches there. And I think growing demand for AI means more demand for data and IoT data more generally, and probably qualitatively needs to be a bit more real time. So that's that point about driving demand for IoT data. The second one's about AI inferencing on IoT devices. So as you get more demand for data for AI, actually you're also getting more companies integrating AI into their propositions, and often into IoT devices, on edge devices. And we've done a bunch of work around this, around what we term AIoT, which is AI on IoT devices, and that's going to be, something like 10% of IoT devices have onboard AI in 2024, and that's going to about 25% in 2034. So not only is IoT being used for generating the data that's used in AI, you're also seeing AI going on to IoT devices with more requirement for edge compute. And the interesting example that I tend to think about is around video analytics, sensing and replacing IoT sensors with video cameras, where the compute sits on the edge device, or maybe in the cloud, or some combination of the two. But certainly using a lot more AI and a lot more intelligence on what are ostensibly IoT devices. And then that raises the question of the third point here. What role do network operators or MVNOs play in the management orchestration of that distributed AI? The data processing is going to happen at one of many levels, with management of models and so on. So that's all about trade-offs between capabilities and costs. And so, for instance, in that video example, increasing use of functionality to modify the application to reflect the network capabilities. So you've got network-aware applications that need to think about, okay, well, I need to process my video data on an edge device. How much data do I need to transmit? How can I optimize how that works? How can I optimize how you do the model updates and so on? So that's all inherently quite localized, and it creates, we think, something of an opportunity. Sorry, I've talked long enough. Luigi, thoughts on those top three?
No, on the top three, I think that you mentioned, you show in the previous graph the growth of AIoT, and by AIoT, pragmatically, what we see today is, for example, the adoption of a lot of IP cameras that are not just recording, but they're acting, they're doing something. Mm-hmm. We see a growth trend there from a cellular connectivity point of view, meaning we see more and more devices connected that are in the camera domain. And then studying a bit what kind of devices these are, we see that some of them, an increasing number, are cameras with AI functions that are embedded in it. Also, we saw some interesting use cases from the Americas and from Australia, where the end user, the end customer, are enterprises, and these ones are deploying AI-enabled dash cams to monitor, to help drivers of fleets, of commercial fleets, not of personal vehicles, but of commercial fleets, alert them and do, in a way, the ADAS part of the assistant, but studied for heavy vehicles, for commercial vehicles, in a retrofitting way, in a retrofitted way. So this is an increase of, it's a trend, it's an increasing usage, and it brings with it very often an increase in the consumption of data.
Yeah.
Together with it, it brings two more things. Probably we're going to speak about it later, but it brings the need for homogeneous performances, because of course, when either you do the AI at the edge or you do the AI on the cloud, it changes the paradigm of which kind of connectivity you need, how performant, what's the performance of the connectivity that you need, right, across the world. And also, since you start being a bit more showing up in the data domain, meaning your consumption increases, networks and policymakers are looking at these with more attention, then it's important to be behaving according to the regulation. It's important to be compliant there, because it's not just the smart meter. Seeing the smart meter kind of consumption in the midst of the B2C consumption, it's difficult. Seeing a growing amount of terabytes and terabytes means that in the future more regulations will be applied also to the IoT. So it's important to be compliant going forward.
And you have the baseline requirements to comply with whatever the AI, the local AI regulations are as well, right? So, which may have increasing challenges associated with it. We'll come on to talk about regulation in a little bit. That's a separate topic. And then the other element that we had on this discussion about opportunities presented by AI was one I referred to right right at the start, which is about how MNOs and MVNOs might use AI themselves. Now, we posed that question to a whole set of network operators and MVNOs about a year and a half ago, and the answers were really that it was used for some quite mundane things and things that companies in all sorts of other sectors would use it for. So to do with invoicing and coding and chatbots and that sort of stuff. But you fast forward 18 months and actually it's being used in rather more sophisticated ways. So around anomaly detection, routing optimization, dynamic pricing, whole bunch of other areas. So this illustrates perfectly why we've picked this one out as the number one topic to talk about, because it's definitely emerging and certainly not a settled set of opportunities or capabilities. So it's changing quite rapidly.
Yes, on that I agree. And as we said before, now the more sophisticated kind of use cases are in a research phase, in an exploration phase, but we see POCs. And for example, on the network optimization and on the dynamic price adjustments. But what's getting more and more, what's becoming more and more concrete is it's the part of the delivery. Now, the last point here, it says how to optimize the delivery of IoT connectivity. Delivery means the support. Delivery means the invoicing. Delivery means making sure that you spot anomalies in the traffic or in your SIM estate. And for these kind of use cases, we see a more pragmatic, a more practical approach, not just exploration, but we see that there are solutions, there are agents that have been implemented here and there to support on these kind of activities. And it's also something on which we are working directly.
And quite a lot of trial and error, actually. One MVNO that I was talking to, this is probably in the conversations 18 months ago, said that they tried to train an agent on all of their own documentation. It really hadn't worked out very well, and they kind of went back to the rim. There's a lot of trial and error going on, really. So, good. We should move swiftly on because there's a lot of other stuff to get to. We've already looked at that slide. So poll time again. And specifically, so the next topic is around increasingly complex technology landscape. We want to talk about three things here, but one of them is probably the hottest topic in IoT connectivity at the moment, which is around SGP32. Let me start that poll going, and you can all start voting, and I should share the results with you. Here we go. How do you expect the introduction of SGP32 IoT remote SIM provisioning to affect your business? And I'm conscious that the audience is largely MNOs and MVNOs, but there will be quite a few enterprises and others in there as well. So let's see. Well, here we go. We're getting somewhat similar distribution to what we got last time, but in a different way. In as much as it's much more proactive and positive. So either unsure or significantly or moderately positive towards remote SIM provisioning. So that's, I think, a very good thing. It's certainly going to have an impact. That's for sure. Okay, so I'm going to close that poll now and move on to the next slide. Here we go. So these were actually the three that we wanted to talk to. The three areas around the technology landscape and the increasing complexity that comes as a result of that. First one is this SGP32 IoT remote SIM provisioning that we mentioned already. I'll just put a little slide to illustrate. Here we go. So this one's illustrating the three standards. You've probably seen this or some variation of this at some point in the past. And really, I mean, anyone involved in, as I said, cellular-based IoT will be very aware. It's arriving just about now. I think it's safe to say it's an improvement on the standards that came before.
Yeah.
more control for the customer, more flexibility. But we would always stress that it's not a magic wand that solves all the challenges, and don't confuse it for a tool for delivering a fully featured set of connectivity capabilities.
Yeah.
And you know, there's other complexity to it than just how you localize your SIMs. But the impact, we think, boils down to really two things: less roaming and more local connections, so local contracting, local management, and so on, and the emergence of the role of something we've described as the eSIM orchestrator, which manages how the connections shift between network operators. And I think that's the interesting dynamic, is that we'll see more localization and the emergence of this new additional role, and it's coming quite rapidly. So this was our set of forecasts we did on the emergence of this opportunity, and so it comes through quite rapidly. It's slightly slowed down by the fact that this is installed base, and so obviously it takes a while to permeate through existing deployments and so on. But certainly it becomes a significant part of the market. Luigi, thoughts on this one?
I think the first two answers show that the general belief is that it will open up new opportunities, and I really believe so. I totally agree with that. It opens up new opportunities for existing providers, but it opens the door to new kind of providers, which in a way it's the second answer. Now the second option was it's an opportunity, but it may pose some threats or something similar to that. And I think I agree with that, because the threats it may pose to some of us in this market, to some of our customers in the market, is new kind of players may come up. You mentioned the aggregator. I would mention some SIM vendors. It opens the door for them also to start potentially providing connectivity. I think one other topic for which SGP32 is important is compliancy, because it's another tool, a better tool, a more flexible tool to be compliant in some areas of the world where the situation is still foggy. So it's something that it's future-proof more than onboarding new local IMSIs, where the local regulatory may choose to do what Turkey did, for example, and therefore you need to then go with an SGP standard.
Yeah.
But overall, I think that if we all keep flexibility in mind and we all focus on the end user experience, we can come up with something very interesting when it comes to SGP32 deployment.
Well, I had been planning when we get on to the topic of regulation, and one of the things within that is permanent roaming and associated things.
Yeah.
And one of the points there was that it's part of the reason for the development of this technology was to help to address those challenges. And there are others. I mean, it's the third of the standards for remote SIM provisioning, and essentially localization of connections was part of the aim of all of those. And so it's not specific to 32, but as you say, 32 is rather more elegant.
Not specific, but I think it's three different iterations potentially of the same process, with the 22 having a bit different focus. But I think this makes it easier. Yes, the idea initially was the same, but this makes it easier, and I think we all have nice hopes for it. As you said, it's not going to be magic, so we all need to be aware of that. There's complexity in it, and I hear people that still didn't realize that, but it's normal. It's like the previous SGP 2202. There's a hype around it. The situation will clarify. The important thing, as I said, is that we all keep a flexible approach and a proactive approach to it.
I think it would be nice to think that it resolves all the regulatory issues, but the whole new set of regulatory issues that have cropped up as a result, right? So just to the point where we've solved it, the regulators come up with some different things to deal with. But we'll come on to that one.
Keep us busy, Matt. Otherwise,
sorry.
to keep us busy.
Yeah. Of course,
Otherwise
you've
we get bored.
got to keep everybody on their toes, right?
Yeah.
Okay, so second point on here, changing middleware landscape and the arrival of the abstraction, aggregation, single pane of glass platform. So I see there being a direct line between the introduction of SDP32 and the fact that with increasing localization of connections, you effectively need a piece of middleware to manage across the multiple platforms and core networks on which those connections might be sitting. So that does drive an additional set of functionality, what's been termed the single pane of glass, although we've tended to describe it as abstraction or aggregation
Yep.
type platform. So interesting trend, that, I think.
Absolutely. The only thing I would say, judging by what I'm seeing in my day to day, at least, is it can become very complex to handle. So I personally, I haven't seen a single solution that encompasses everything a service provider needs to embrace this properly. I see more of a modular solution where you need to pick pieces of solution from different providers. Personally, maybe I can share that at floLIVE we're taking the approach of having a one-stop shop with on these regards, which in the end, if you think about, is what we've been doing from the beginning. So putting multiple IMSIs in it and putting the CMP on top of it and putting the BSS on top of it and allowing everyone to consume it the way they want it. And we will then also make generally available the SGP32 layer and the aggregation layer on which we're working, so that if a service provider wants to embrace this, then they can do it really on a single pane of glass, on a one-stop shop, instead of building basically their own micro infrastructure, because the issue then is managing third parties. At floLIVE, in a normal month, we manage almost 100 third-party maintenance windows, IMSI providers, different services, and that's not easy to do. And if you are a service provider, MNOs can do it, yes. Large MVNOs can do it. Service providers may want to be lean, stay lean, be flexible, because that's important, and focus on really delivering the connectivity. So that's my opinion. That's our opinion, floLIVE. That's what we're trying to do in the regards of single point of glass.
Okay. I think we're going to have to move swiftly through the network technology fragmentation point, but the point on this one was you've got things like 2G and 3G switch off, maybe 4G switch off coming. You've got 5G deployments where sometimes there's standalone deployed and sometimes there isn't. You've got NB-IoT and LTE-M deployed in various different ways. You've got all sorts of technologies. Unlike the old days where effectively you developed a GPRS device and you stuck it out on any network and it worked fine regardless of where it ended up in the world. Now you've got a lot more fragmentation, so you've got to have a lot more consideration of what the networks available might be and how you might have the appropriate partnerships with network operators in the markets in order to ensure that actually your connectivity is going to work when it goes out into the field. So it's become much more complex.
Yeah, it is complex.
So I'm going to move on because we're halfway through and we've got probably way more than half of our content left to talk to. So let's jump on that. Oh, this was just an illustration of all of that fragmentation we're seeing as a slide. Regulation. We promised you discussion of regulation. Let's have some discussion of regulation, and we have a poll to go. And I will hit play on that one. Here we go. So. Compared to 2 years ago, how often are compliance and data sovereignty raised in your IoT connectivity discussions? So you'll have me think about that. Much more frequently, slightly more frequently, about the same, less frequently. Okay. Well, I think I'm not surprised by what's coming in as the answers here. I think probably you could have done this kind of posed this kind of question every year and said, has it become more complicated over the last 2 years? And the answer would always have been pretty
Yes.
much yes, right? I think it's not that surprising. I think what we see is, and I'm just going to close the poll because I think the results are fairly clear. So let's close that poll and move on to the points to talk about. I think the point is here that really there's two areas that are important. I mean, there's multiple areas of regulation that affect IoT device certification and RF regulations and so on. But specifically to cellular-based IoT connectivity, one is around permanent roaming. That's been an issue that's always been around. One of the reasons for doing remote SIM provisioning, and there's a number of things that sort of fit under that umbrella of permanent roaming. So sometimes it's about licensing, and sometimes it's about taxation, and now increasingly it's about eSIM profiles. And quite a lot of effort's gone into solving those problems, and actually they've been resolved in. Most providers have a solution for Brazil, for instance, right?
Yeah.
That was always posed as being the challenging one, but there's more complexity and lack of clarity in a whole bunch of other markets like Turkey and India and so on. But the underlying thing is that it drives a requirement for more localization in two ways: understanding what the local regulations are and making sure you're compliant with them, and two, actually localizing the connection typically, because anywhere that's prohibiting permanent roaming is inherently saying you have to localize onto a local SIM or local eSIM profile. So that inevitably is going to be the case. Sorry, thoughts on that one, Luigi? While my phone's ringing.
No, it's as you described in the previous slide. It's a perennial issue, and we live in a geopolitical moment that unfortunately will only make this more complicated. It will certainly not ease it down. And most of the providers, yes, are finding solutions. The issue is that there are still areas where the situation, at least for IoT, is a bit gray. So, for example, North America, if you pick Canada, some providers have been restricted, some other providers haven't been restricted. Same goes for other regions of the world. For example, across Africa, I see you mentioned Nigeria. Yes, permanent roaming is prohibited, but there are some providers that have special deals. So this will keep evolving. And I know I sound like a broken record, but the important thing is we need solutions to be flexible. We need people to be able to go left and right, because this market is not gonna, let's say, settle from the regulation point of view. I think it's actually going to be more and more hectic from a regulation point of view, not just on permanent roaming.
No, I think the interesting one is what you need to do about eSIM profiles specifically. So obviously Turkey is one example where the regulator has set some quite strict rules about it, but India also seems to be following suit, and I think there might be other rules coming in.
But you see the complexity here, for example, is Turkey. As much as the situation the solution they went with, it's fairly complex. At least there are clear rules.
Yeah, true.
In many other areas, what we hear from customers, can you tell us exactly what the rules are on permanent roaming? And very often we don't know because they're not clear. That's why I'm saying it's important to have solutions that are flexible. SGP32 makes it very flexible. I think so far Multi-IMSI made it very flexible. Probably it's not either or, maybe it's a mix of the two that can keep it as flexible as needed going forward.
Well, I'll give you another example as well. I think of that the uncertainty is around know your customer rules, KYC rules, specifically for IoT. We've done a lot of work and just published a report recently where we went out to 70 something regulators asking about, well, what are the KYC rules in your country for mobile phone users and also for IoT? And the vast majority said, we don't really know, or words to that effect. there aren't really any specific rules, or we're not sure what the specific rules are. So it's a moving target. Now, I expect that there'll be more clarity on these things in the next few years, but it's a challenging environment, that's for sure. And the other one we wanted to talk to was things that are not permanent roaming, specifically around data management. So that might include, in fact, I've got a little slide here showing some examples here. So this is around this ever evolving and expanding set of rules around how you manage data. And there's a big requirement to be aware of the rules and how they pertain to the local geography. So that might be about privacy, data sovereignty, cyber security, cyber resilience, and then this all kind of comes together over on the right-hand side in things to do with national resilience. So some of the rules might dictate changing approaches to how you even architect your solution. So the EU Data Act requires that you've got to make data available to third parties if you're an IoT solution provider. The NIS2 directive has some quite strict requirements around national resilience, things working in closed border situations. There's a whole series of regulations which are specific to the country or the region, and so that's one aspect of it, but also have some requirement on them for how you manage the data, whether you do that within an individual country, how you architect the solutions that you're building as well. So again, more localization requirements and more complexity. I think that's a fair way of describing it, right?
Yeah, indeed. We've always seen a need for data sovereignty, but surely lately the situation is becoming more complicated.
Definitely, and we see again a lot of it's sort of grey areas as well. Nothing's quite tested in reality or tested legally, and so everyone's kind of wondering a little bit what their obligations are with a lot of these things. But certainly the point is you've got to make sure you're keeping an eye on what those obligations are. So
yes, and again, these sorry, if I can add something, the fact that we have more and more use cases that are augmenting their intelligence. It can go from a POS to an AI-enabled camera. Make it so that the privacy part, the data sovereignty part, the cybersecurity, the cyber resiliency are more and more important. So it's a physiological growth. Now we see increase of data, we see increase of performance required, but of course we also see an increase of attention of what's needed around this solution. Because again, the POS of maybe not 5, 7, 8 years ago was a device consuming 2-5 megabytes in GPRS. You don't have to worry much about its cyber resiliency. But when it's a full Android device consuming 200, 300 megabytes a month with firmware updates and many other tools in it, many other applications in it, and with a much more flexible operated human interface, then you need to start worrying about cyber resiliency, data privacy. These devices have cameras on it, for example, for scanning several things. It's a whole set of different IoT devices that we have on the market now compared to a few years back.
Yes, and much greater sensitivity about it, even if it was a very basic type of application. Part of that's to do with the cyber security, mirrored botnets and all that sort of stuff. But part of it's also geopolitical. 5 years ago, 10 years ago, I suspect no one would have much cared if your IoT data, M2M data as it might have been, was tromboned via China and then back to the user and whatever. Now those kinds of issues there's a lot of focus on them in a lot of places. So I think it's a critical thing. Okay, moving on. Our final topic: shifting commercial realities. We've got another poll for you. Let me get that one up and running. This is the last one, by the way, so you won't have to click any more buttons after this. For IoT connectivity providers specifically, so those of you in the audience who are MNOs, MVNOs, which of the following approaches do you expect to be your main mechanism for counteracting price declines in IoT cellular connectivity? Reducing the cost to support connections, adding value-added services, providing paid consulting, selling end-to-end vertical solutions, or moving into some adjacent areas. Just share that as they come in. I think the point here is that this is an issue that's been ongoing for quite a while. Price decline in the baseline cellular connectivity has been an ongoing thing for forever and ever, and actually maybe probably a little bit less of a problem than it was about 5 or 10 years ago. But nevertheless, it does focus the attention on, well, then if the revenue that's coming in from the core constituent proposition that I'm selling is declining, how do I generate additional revenue or reduce my costs? So I think we've probably got enough results coming through. Adding additional value-added features to the connectivity. Well, that's an interesting
proactive audience. We have good.
It is, yeah. And much less so on end-to-end vertical solutions, which is good. I think end-to-end vertical solutions is something we always tell our network operator and MVNO clients to be quite cautious about, because
many MNOs tried, but it's not easy to scale.
No, and you're typically into really crowded marketplaces, and you have to establish a right to play, and you can in some scenarios, often through acquisition, but typically it's quite tricky. This is very definitively seen as being about adding value-added features, which is interesting because every time I have the conversation with MNOs and MVNOs about adding value-added services and monetizing value-added services, it was they're always strenuous to comment, or they admit that they've actually struggled themselves to find value-added services that they can monetize in order to drive additional revenue. Whereas something like paid consulting and enhanced pre-sales, post-sales support, often they're much more effective in providing those capabilities. I don't know whether you've got thoughts on that, Luigi.
Maybe I was just about to say that maybe AI itself could open the door for some interesting value-added services on top of connectivity. In the past, we've seen a lot of MVNOs and MNOs trying to add the device management layer on top of the connectivity. In many cases, it didn't really fly much, but maybe with the help of AI, that can change. Now that can be simplified, because eventually what I've seen often is that, for example, module makers are good at selling modules. They're not very good at selling connectivity, and connectivity providers are very good at selling connectivity. They're not very good at selling a module or a device management or another added set, because it's a different argumentation, it's different dialogue, it's different support for the solution. Maybe with the help of AI, we can make that easier. We can launch add-on solutions easily. And on top of that, in the complexity, there's also an opportunity, meaning in a growing data privacy regulation, there probably is an opportunity for add-on services in those regards. In a growing, increasingly regulated world, there is, because we do it, there is a growing opportunity, for example, for localized core networks, for localized packet gateways, not to respond to certain regulations. Sorry. So there is space for added value services. There's gonna be a lot of trials and a lot of failures probably, but I think we need to, as an industry, we need to keep doing that, because yes, I agree. You said before there have been phases, meaning the price erosion, the connectivity data price erosion was an issue more some years ago than now. But I would not fully agree with that, because what happened lately, what's happening till now, is the SGP22 rise for consumers is eroding the data prices for IoT, because many end users think they're comparing apples with apples, where they're not, but they pressure the provider because they see that on the market they can get a gigabyte for, I don't know, sometimes I hear price like 30 cents, things like that. And this crushes the market. And we need to be good at, one, of course, educating the market, explaining that an apple is not an orange. But at the same time, we need to be good in understanding which are the added value service. What is an added value service? Because in the connectivity market, the product we provide is intangible. Most of it is intangible. And it's very difficult. I always found it very difficult to make it tangible. So it may be that in the service that some of us are already providing, there are value-added services. We just don't leverage on them. We just don't see them as value-added, but as part of connectivity.
Yeah.
We need to focus on this as an industry to bring, again, the value up of what we deliver, because there's a lot of value in what we deliver. It's not always recognized.
There is, for sure. It's just quite sometimes difficult to communicate it. You talk about intangible security. Security tends to be one of the big value-added services that gets discussed as an opportunity. But the challenge is communicating it to the would-be customer to say, well, you've on the one hand you've got this baseline proposition, and then on the other hand you've got the secure one, and they'll ask, well, hang on a second, is the first one not secure? So why would I buy this secure version? So it's challenging. But I think there is something in what you say about AI. So, for instance, just labeling value-added services as AI-enabled features maybe is a way to differentiate them. So AI security, right? Rather than just the old traditional way of doing security. Well, now you've got an AI agent that's going to be looking after your security, and I think that's something that is bizarrely more comprehensible for a would-be adopter than just a premium tier security versus a basic tier security.
That's a very good point, Matt.
I'm going to close that poll now, and
someone in marketing may just be using it right now to build new proposition. Now that you said it, royalties go to Matt.
Yeah, exactly. I want my cut of that. I think we talked through most of this. We talked through value-added services, really. The question of supporting connections in a more cost-effective way. The point here is, I think we've seen a pronounced trend towards everybody wanting to be much more OPEX oriented rather than CAPEX oriented for a start. It's not necessarily about reducing costs, but more about scalability and so on.
Yeah.
You're thinking on that, Luigi, before we move on to
As I said before, flexibility is key. It's the future is uncertain globally, but also especially in this market. So flexibility is key, and CAPEX is less flexible than OPEX, meaning it's less scalable than OPEX. It's less can be steered less than OPEX. So we definitely see a switch to OPEX more than CAPEX. And we also see appreciation for flexible business models rather than standard business models of, let's say, of the past.
Good stuff. Okay. So I think the key theme here is what we've been talking about through those trends is localization, things to do with SGP32, permanent roaming, specific network technologies per market, data management, AI. All of that points to things being local. What we had planned to talk about for a little bit, but we're running up against time now, is what should MNOs and MVNOs do to better address the market? I'm going to steer people towards taking a look at the report so that we've got some time for Q&A rather than running through this in detail. We have some suggestions there on what the different approaches might be for global MNOs versus national MNOs, because it's quite different, versus MVNOs. But I did want to give you, Luigi, the opportunity to comment on this one if you had some thoughts on this.
Yeah, so the as I said before, the different type of service providers have different needs. The more one on the right, the MVNOs, the lighter they are, and by lighter I just mean the less infrastructure they own, which is not necessarily a bad thing. Actually, sometimes, often is the other way around. But the lighter they are, so as a light MVNO, the more single one-stop shop solution, in my opinion, they will need, because they're just it's becoming cumbersome otherwise to manage all these components that you just listed down. The more we go to the left, global MNOs now, look at Vodafone, they have their own GDSP, which is a great solution, a mature solution. For them to add components on top, it's easier. For them, it's more complex to maybe cope with the changing nature of this market, because by nature they are larger, they're slower by nature, they're more complex as entities. So I think we need to, our attendees, our partners, they need to juggle between being lean but not owning everything, and being less lean but owning everything, or owning multiple components. I don't know what's the best. By experience, I know that, again, since this market needs us to be all flexible, the more flexible the solution you are adopting is, the better it will be, and the easier it will be for you to scale. There's always time to start owning things, but it shouldn't be the case from the get-go. You shouldn't own everything from the get-go. This is important.
Okay, at that point, what we had in the schedule is just to, I'm going to hand it over to you, Luigi, to talk through how floLIVE addresses the opportunity. We're a little short on time, but
we're a bit short on time. So, Matt, what I would suggest is, if we have questions, I would say let's have a look also at questions instead of going through my slides, and then I will be happy to get in touch with anyone in our attendees list if they want more information on our slides, and to provide a copy of them, of course.
Absolutely, and we do have questions. So the first one was one that came in ahead of the session. So that was, it's very complimentary about floLIVE, actually, and this is genuinely a question that came in from somebody who didn't work for floLIVE.
I didn't write
it. As one of the leading multi-IMSI providers, what's the most challenging technical and commercial issues on SGP32 multi-IMSI solution floLIVE has found so far?
What's the most challenging? Making it an homogeneous experience. What do I mean by that? The multi-IMSI that we offer has several IMSIs. Now we have 14 IMSIs, but all of them provide the same identical experience to the user, being our MVNO or MNO customer, or their customer, the end user. Same identical experience. Okay, so there's a pay-as-you-go, they can set the same kind of billing rates, they get the same kind of signaling events, they have the same SIM life cycle for all of these 14 IMSIs. Now, when we start adding SGP32 on top of it, as much as we said we are working and building the aggregation layer, it's more than just seeing your new profile, your AT&T profile, your whatever, Telstra profile on the platform. It's also assigning the billing to it. So you're going to have fragmented billing, because MNOs most probably are not going to give you a wholesale pay-as-you-go price, or maybe not to everyone, right? And more importantly, the user experience, the troubleshooting experience is going to be different. The signaling event that the Telstra platform, now I don't know precisely what platform they have there, just for as an example, has
Control Center, I believe, but they may be running.
So Control Center has different signaling events than us, different naming conventions, different frequency of it. So from my point of view, one of the challenges that we're seeing in merging multi-IMSI and SGP32 is, how do we keep providing an homogeneous single pane of glass experience to customers? Because saying single pane of glass, meaning you see all your SIMs in a SIM list in the same page, it's easy. Making them able to troubleshoot and to maintain the life cycle of these SIMs, it's not that easy to do.
No, completely agree. I mean, it's quite apparent that managing eSIMs is about more than just managing eSIMs, right? You can't just pick up 100,000 connections from one operator, move them over to another operator, and expect all of the back end integration to work and the settings and have you negotiated the commercial arrangements, and it's a challenging thing, and it has to be provided as a managed service, and we keep saying this rather than just something that someone will do themselves.
Yes.
That seems to be the prevailing trend. So next one. What are your expectations for the level of competition in the market and consolidation within it?
Okay,
well,
good.
It is a good question. My 2 pence first. My thought. I mean, there's no MNO to MNO consolidation, right? Because it doesn't drive consolidation for network operators. But on the MVNO side of things, we do see lots of MVNOs being acquired by other MVNOs. There's some consolidation there. Even MNOs working increasingly closely with certain MVNOs and acquiring them. SoftBank with Cubic, for instance, and a few other deals there. It's a natural reaction to the growing competition, right? You want to reduce your costs, you want to find additional value-added services, but also you want to find additional scale, and that's it is an obvious thing that happens and will continue to happen, I think, but pretty much entirely on the MVNO side of things. Luigi, you agree?
Yeah, no, I agree, and we see now everyone sees more consolidation. There's gonna be more competition because, as I said, nothing will stop, for example, the SIM manufacturers from providing connectivity with SGP32. There's going to be more competition. There's going to be more consolidation, but there is more flexibility of thought. We are seeing an increasingly high amount of MNOs opening their mind to using different solutions than before, not exclusively relying on their own single roaming agreements, for example. Right? This is a big change compared to 5-6 years ago. It's a big change, and I see more open-mindedness there.
Becoming a bit more MVNO-like, in fact.
Yeah, becoming more flexible also on their side, understanding that there's not only their solution, understanding that the market is dynamic. They need to be able to embrace change. And again, these are very large and complex organizations for which often IoT is not the main thing. Not B2C very often is the main thing. And it's nice to see open-mindedness more and more there. That's very nice to see.
I think if we looked at this 2 years ago, well, we did look at it 2 years ago. What you were seeing is, or in the last 2 years, you'll have more consolidation than there is new entrants coming into the market. So there was some consolidation. Yeah. What you get with SGP32, I think, is a fragmentation of the roles around eSIM orchestration versus reselling connectivity versus running your networks, and you'll start to get, I think, quite a lot of companies that are trying to do that eSIM orchestration, the soft piece, the software piece, and you'll get, I think, a lot more competition in that space. And that'll play out in an interesting way. So
there, if I can say one thing, what I would suggest to existing providers, if the situation becomes what you just said, which is a good view on it, I may agree on it, I tend to agree on it, then it's very important to convey knowledge, to convey expertise to the market, because of course the newcomers cannot bring that to the table, or may not be able to bring that to the table.
Yeah, how do you differentiate in an entirely software-based market based on effectively based on a standard? It's pretty challenging, and you do it based on heritage, expertise. Help walking the customer through the challenges of deploying this stuff. It becomes much more of a human thing than it's anything else. On that note, that's quite a good note to leave it, I think. A reminder, the position paper is available there. You'll get a little reminder about that one when we have the report, the webinar available for replay. And if you want to get in touch with either floLIVE or with us at Transforma Insights, that's how to do it. Luigi, thank you. This has been a really interesting conversation. It's been
Thanks very much.
could have gone on for another hour, I'm sure.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Yeah.
I want to say thanks and thank you everybody at home for tuning in.
Indeed.
And thanks for the questions, even though we didn't get to most of them. So
thanks for your time, everyone who attended. Thanks, Matt, for arranging it.